Hello folks, little video blog on loser tribes and the crazy years. Now let me define the crazy years. I didn't come up with the term, it's a term made by science fiction author Robert Heinlein, who was very skilled by the way. You might know his movie, badly adapted, Starship Troopers. And as part of his novels, he created a whole future history, everything between the time that he was writing the novel up to the time set in the novel. And many of his novels were set along the timeline so that an earlier novel would be part of the past history of a later novel. One of the times that it was referenced but really didn't have a novel built around it was what he called the crazy years, a time when society collectively lost its mind. And I've been starting to call this period that we're going through the crazy years because, let's face it, things aren't normal. Societal collapses usually take time. You know, if you look at the Roman Empire, of course, that took damn near centuries. Actually, centuries. Former Yugoslavia, it was years before militias really started to take over. Venezuela, the economic collapse took 5 to 10 years before people were picking through garbage. But if you had gone back to, if you got a time machine, go back to yourself a decade ago and told them that in America, people would, be cheering on the fact that political rallies were being shut down by violence, would they have believed you? How about a situation where children have to go into hiding because the mob thinks that they smirked the wrong way at a Native American activist that confronted them banging a drum in their face? Would they have believed that? How about the rise of autonomous zones? Or people losing their job because they admitted voting the wrong way? Inflation, the rise in homeless camps. Compare what we have now compared to a decade ago, and you realize, yeah, these are the crazy years, and the trends are going to continue because there's really nothing standing up to them. If anything, it's increasing, just like inflation is increasing every month. So, these are the crazy years. There's many factors causing the rise in the crazy years, and one of them is loser tribes. Now, I'm putting this together basically because I put together a book called Killer Chaos, Surviving the Crazy Years, and a lot of the people that follow me on Facebook have bought it. And so I kind of assumed that when I use the term loser tribes, which I describe in the book, that people know it. But no, I recently used it and, people were asking. Short version, I got a lot of enemies. Trust me, a lot of enemies. I have exposed frauds, outed crazies. I've even sent people that rape children to prison. When you do things like that, you get some pretty intense, obsessed enemies. So one of these guys is a guy named John Duvall, first name spelled Jon. And yeah, he's been so obsessed with me. I mean, part of it hates me, but by every metric, I am superior to him. He wants to be a ninja master, but he could only get up to about blue belt level in the art that I did before he started his own art. He's a rent-a-cop that tries to present himself as if he was a real police officer on Facebook without actually saying so. That kind of thing. So he lately put together, like 2 weeks ago, put together a profile called John Rowley with the spelling of his first name and, of course, my last name. Just close enough to, avoid being taken off Facebook for impersonating somebody else. And he's put in like 50 to 100 hours of effort into this, making videos, making friends, joining groups, all that. I mean, he has spent an inordinate amount of time on this. And the thing is that, people have been telling me things and that he's crazed. I mean, I had a criminal psychologist basically say that what he's doing is like the digital version of somebody wearing somebody else's skin because they want to become them. And I casually mentioned that all the reactions from people outside of John's loser tribe have been horrified and will not have anything to do with him in his real persona anymore. But he doesn't seem to realize that. He tries to run a podcast, and a lot of people that he reached out to do the podcast just flat out told me that after putting up John Rowley, they won't have anything to do with him. But he doesn't seem to realize that, and he's being urged on by his loser tribe. And of course, when I use the term loser tribe, people asked, what I mean. So I'm putting this together. Now, The best example, enjoyable example of loser tribe you might find is the old movie called Say Anything with John Cusack. It's a romantic comedy set back, I think, in the 80s. Cusack finds a girl, falls in love with the girl, loses the girl. For the rest of the movie, he's trying to get her back. As part of this, at one point, he's talking with a bunch of guys sitting outside of a convenience store. They're all sitting on the curb and they've got their large sodas. And they're telling Cusack, what he did wrong with the relationship and what women really want and all that. And finally, Cusack just blows up at them and takes them to task and says, if you guys know so much about women, what are you doing outside of 7-Eleven on a Saturday night instead of a date? Their answer is humorous, but it is a good example of a loser tribe. It's a bunch of people that come together to espouse their views on reality and confirm it and validate it when it's spoken by others. So if you've got a bunch of people sitting around saying, just talking, one of them says, hey, I noticed that the sky really is green. It's not blue, it's green. And somebody else says, yeah, I've seen that too. Well, they've just validated, confirmed it. And as far as the people in the loser tribe are concerned, that's reality. And if anybody else outside their little group says that the sky is blue, well, then they're wrong and their little group is correct. Now, when Say Anything was made, of course, there was geographic limitations. You had to pretty much physically get together outside the 7-Eleven and talk. And that kind of limited the amount of crazy that could be dealt with. Men thinking that they knew what women really want is universally, it's a high percent of the population. But people that think that the world is flat, smaller. People that think that we're ruled by evil lizard overlords, rare still. But with the rise of the internet and social media, you can find somebody somewhere in the world, of the billions of users, that agree with even the most crackpot theories that you have. You might have one person in Dubai, another in Detroit, and the third one in Manchester all saying that what you say is correct, but that's enough for some people. And that's the problem, because not all loser tribes are as silly and funny as the one that surrounds John Duvall and his bunch of would-be ninjas. Years ago, the term incel became common knowledge to the populace when a guy in Canada rammed his car into a crowd and killed 10 people. 10 people dead. All of a sudden, loser tribes aren't that funny anymore. After the massacre, the media jumped on the story and we found out that there's a vast community online of people that call themselves incel, short for involuntary celibate. In other words, there are people that want to have sex but can't have sex because nobody will give them the time of day. These forums of incels weren't positive. They weren't talking about how to improve themselves, how to turn their lives around, how to be able to get the opposite sex to give them the time of day. Instead, they were building each other up and building a world image where they were the victims of popular people. Instead of supportive messages to get people to actually make better of their lives, they were talking about how they were the victims of this vast, conspiracy, I guess, and how anything that they did to what they called the Bettys and all that, Brads and Bettys, was justified because they were the victims. And yes, 10 people died because of this, building each other up until finally someone snapped. Yeah, so this is a reality in the world. And you have to wonder how much loser tribes have had, in some of the cases in the news. The incel guy rammed his car into a crowd. Not too long ago, a guy rammed his car into a parade and killed 6 people. The media really isn't covering the story and they shut down the social media, but you have to understand that this guy, it is reported that this guy was, posting anti-white posts on Facebook, openly, not without censure. They weren't, he was saying things about white people, blaming his woes on them, and, Facebook left it up, I guess. You have to wonder what groups he was part of that were telling each other just how everything in their life was wrong because of people with white skin. Another case, here in Colorado, up in Boulder, a Muslim went 30 minutes out of his way to find a supermarket in Boulder that was kind of famous in the greater Denver area for having the best selection of kosher foods just about anywhere. And he started racking up bodies. Was he part of a group on Facebook that talked about evil Jewish conspiracies and stuff like that? We don't know, because the media is really ignoring these stories. And of course, once that happens, Facebook shuts down their social media accounts. But really, I can tell you that no matter what skin color you have, what religion you believe or not believe, or what economic class you belong to, there are people that are blaming you for the lives that they screwed up. Doesn't matter what they did. They could have been raised by a single parent, dropped out of high school, and then gotten a felony conviction for trying to run over their baby mother with an SUV. But it's not their fault that their life is screwed up. It's your fault. And they exist. That's just the way things are. I mean, those that are successful tend to take responsibility for their lives and not blame others, whereas those that are failures, losers, blame others and don't take responsibility. Thomas Sowell, who lived through real racism, Jim Crow's laws and all that, he couldn't, use certain water fountains, said that back in the day, when he faced this, it was just, okay, this is the reality, how do we overcome it? And he laments that nowadays he's faced with like freshmen in college that are convinced that they cannot get any further in life because they're so oppressed without the help of certain politicians and social programs such as that. This is a reality. We're going to have to deal with it, and first thing you got to ask is, well, how do we stop it? And unless you want to trash the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, I don't see that happening. And I would say that the cure is worse than the disease. But yeah, anyone that wants to find any type of worldview can find it online. Facebook might be able to limit things if they were just even. I mean, if Group A says something about Group B and it got taken down, then Group B saying the same thing about Group A should be treated the same way, in my opinion. Same thing goes for Twitter or whatever. That's not the reality. If Facebook did, then it would help a lot. But that really would only make these people go to other parts of the internet. So that's just a sad fact. But that's the reality that we're living in. There are people out there right now who blame you for their screwed up lives. And they are going into groups and other people are telling them that what they think is correct, that they are the victims, that you are the oppressor, and that anything they do to you is justified, no matter if it be what you did or your ancestors or some guy that you have never even met, but it's your fault that they screwed up their lives. And the types of people that would, just need a little nudge, yeah, they're getting that nudge to do something. I don't have a solution, but if you start looking for this phenomenon that I'm talking about, you'll see it. Once you're told about it, you'll see it everywhere. Everything is not as silly as John Duvall's little groups of would-be ninjas and crazies. Some of them are like the incels that killed 10 people running down their car. And we're not willing to talk about it. We're not willing to deal with the matter. So I don't see the trend changing in the near future. So watch for the phenomenon. Keep your eyes open. The first thing about surviving the crazy years is just realizing what's going on around you. And I hope that people learn from this. Stay safe and be careful.